Welcome back to the Trackstar Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Coyne. This week, we're talking about jazz, and I'm particularly excited about this episode for a few different reasons. One, I feel like I learned so much making this. I'm the type of person who aspires to be a jazz aficionado, but I've never really taken the time to dig in and learn that much about the genre. I love the music. I love how it sounds. I am familiar with some of the most famous names in jazz, but it wasn't until making this episode that I really learned a lot about the history of this music and how that history intersected with American history, the history of recorded music, American culture more broadly. I'm also particularly excited about our guests for this episode because not only are they all extremely knowledgeable and super talented musicians, they're also really great guys and super fun people to talk to. First up, we have 22 Grammy nomination, Academy Award winner, Jon Batiste.
It's hard to even put into words the significance of the moment of these records being made. That kind of stuff, that is greatness.
We're also going to talk to 9-time Grammy Award winner, bass player, band leader, composer, the legendary Christian McBride.
I don't think they were using this word in 1958, but that was a big crossover smash. Like that was a hit.
And of course, we're going to talk to New Jazz Underground, a new group based out of New York City, or a relatively young group based out of New York City. They formed in 2019.
It's a standard tenor saxophone repertoire right here. This is a must-know.
Those guys are a joy to speak with. They also perform a little bit, so we're going to hear a taste of their performance in our studio. So, without further ado, introducing the incomparable Jon Batiste.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Check.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Trackstar, let's go.
I wish the world could be in these headphones right now.
I'm on the show, how fun.
We're off to a very hot start here.
This is the question, Bob-dee-la, and the answer, Bob-dee-dee-on. And then the big question, B flat. Bum-bum-way-on. That has nothing to do with what we're doing right now. At this track, so we gonna run, we gonna race?
We could.
Fight or race.
Well, I just want to learn from you as much as possible.
Man.
And if people want to learn from you.
I feel like it's a beautiful thing to share whatever you have with whoever you know.
Yeah. So I just want to play you songs.
Yeah.
And have you tell me what the song is, who the artist is, what you know about it, what it makes you feel, what you think about it.
Really?
Introduce yourself before we start.
My name is Jon Batiste, and I love you even if I don't know you, because that's the way we should be together in the world.
That's just a little taste of the Jon Batiste you're going to get to experience throughout this episode. He's truly one of a kind. To kick off the playlist, we're going to start with 2 songs that are 2 of not only the earliest jazz recordings, but 2 of the earliest music recordings, period. The first recording is from 1928, and this song helped define solo improvisation and melody in jazz. Check this out. Here.
Louis, man.
What do you hear? What do you hear when you listen to him? This is why I like doing this show, because it's this.
Louis Daniel Armstrong, the Hot 5 and Hot 7 recordings that you're playing right now. Louis Armstrong, he was the Prometheus figure of jazz music. It's like a person who was born to bring something into the world, a lineage of things that will exist long after they're gone. He's basically creating this aspect of our identity and expression through his trumpet, through his singing, through his band, that becomes so foundational that it's like air. It's like
water.
It's like water. You don't think about it. When I hear it, I think about the context of when it was recorded. Okay, RCA Victor, in the recording technology to create music that is transferred to the rest of the world, was created in the same decade as these recordings. So you have the first ever jazz recording, original Dixieland Jazz Band, And not too long after that, New Orleans, you have this evolution of music. You have people who are unsung who weren't recorded, like Buddy Bolden, who Louis Armstrong heard. You have people like King Oliver, who was his mentor, Jelly Roll Morton, Sidney Bechet, all of this explosion of creativity and genius. It's in the aftermath of the enslavement of our ancestors in this country and the formation of this country and the way that all of this intermingling and creative expression, all of that just channeled through an individual who was born in the slums to come out, get a horn in a juvenile detention center. He was firing a gun at 13 years old, put in a juvenile detention center, and got a trumpet. And for that to lead to this recording, which is one of the peak expressions of jazz and blues, Western blues is the name of that record. Just the journey to get there, and then what it became and what it is, and then when you listen to it, the difficulty of musical execution. If any trumpet player, that's still one of the hardest things that they will ever play. That beginning of the Western blues recording that he plays, bip, 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 bop, 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 that's one of the hardest things that anybody will ever play on the trumpet. And then the arrangements of that band. I mean, you talk about defying genre. It's all of the root musics. Folk, Americana, that should be included in what we call Americana. Blues, obviously jazz. He's one of the inventors of jazz. Elements of European classics, like the way the horns are phrasing, the vibrato is operatic. You know, he listened to an opera singer in town, Tetrazzini. He heard a lot of music when he was growing up in New Orleans at this time. All of the immigrants coming into one of the biggest port cities at the time, all coming together to create what is our New Orleans culture. And then he's born in the middle. Yeah, it's unbelievable. That record is like, it's hard to even put into words the significance of the moment of these records being made. It's not even like that's an amazing record. It's not even just like, he's a great player. Like, people still don't fully understand the significance of those recordings. And I'll just leave it at that.
What I love about Jon's reaction to this song is not just hearing what he thinks about the music, but about all the influences and the technology that went into the making of this recording. Song number 2, a swing era ballad from 1935.
Edward Kennedy Ellington, you saw I had to kneel when you started playing the record. It's like a knight, sir. yeah. He starts with the high register reed, solo melody in a sentimental mood, right?
Yeah.
Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Second time the melody is stated, it's the low, the tenor coming in, right? There's a symmetry that's being built. It's an ebb and a flow. High, low, high with low together, and then the solo comes in, and it's the trumpet that starts the theme and starts the improvisation on the theme. So it goes from reeds setting up the mood to brass with the power, and the rhythm section goes into a 4-beat. That kind of stuff, that is greatness.
He's the greatest American composer, right?
By far and away.
Were you always listening to Duke Ellington?
When I was in high school for the first time, I listened to him live at Newport. I picked it up because I liked the cover. He's wearing this, like a seersucker blazer, and he's looking up. He's got a great charisma to him. I'd heard about Duke Ellington. I knew some of his music. I knew, like, Take the A-Train and a few songs like that. So
by the way, that's how it starts, with a lot of great stuff. You look at the cover.
Look at the cover.
Which you have great covers.
Oh, man, the covers, the covers has got to be.
Okay, so you pick it up.
In the library. I put the record on, put the headphones on, I'm listening to it. And the first thing I think about is, wow, that sounds like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Duke is music that makes you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah.
And it inhabits you. It's music that is meant for you to connect to it and vibrate with its frequency and let it become a part of you. And it's such a deep, deep thing that he was able to be so consistent and prolific. I could go on and on about Duke.
Real quick, let's check in with Christian McBride. We're going to hear a lot more from him later, but for now, he's going to share an interesting anecdote about Duke Ellington's unique recording techniques.
When this music we know as jazz was recorded in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and early 60s, of course, this is long before the days of multi-tracking, and stereo wasn't even standard yet. one of the reasons why Duke Ellington was so important, not just in jazz, but was the way he recorded. He would put the bass player in front of the band because somehow Duke inherently knew that people react to the bass. They feel the bass. So on my records, I want people to hear the bass. So there wasn't no put a microphone on each saxophone player, on each trumpet player, one on the bass. Well, now they got multiple inputs for the bass, But back then it was just whatever you heard on the record, that's exactly how the band played in the room. Which is why I think musicians once upon a time just had a better sense of how to play a room.
Yeah.
And then that multi-tracking came along and, sorry.
That last song is from the 1930s, a time when jazz really was that era's version of pop music. They didn't call it pop music at the time, but it was the popular music of the day. It's part of what's known as the swing era, when composers like Duke Ellington worked with big bands to make music for halls and bigger venues that people actually danced to. All right, let's go back to the studio for a short essay on the swing era and its importance in jazz history. Today, most people hear jazz in restaurants, lounges, or concert halls, settings where the music feels nostalgic or even museum-like. So it's hard to imagine a time when jazz was America's pop music, something you might hear at a bar, a house party, or blasting from a radio in a teenager's bedroom. But that was exactly the case in the years leading up to World War II. The jazz age of the 20s was shaped by small combos and hot improvisational styles featuring innovative soloists like Louis Armstrong, Bix Beiderbecke, and Jelly Roll Morton. But as jazz bands grew in size to fill larger venues and dance halls, the need for tighter arrangements led to the rise of the big band format. In 1931, Duke Ellington debuted It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. The song's title captured a shift in American popular music and in some ways predicted where it was headed. In 1935, Benny Goodman, later dubbed the King of Swing, broke through after a landmark performance at the Palomar Ballroom in Los Angeles. That night is often seen as the unofficial start of the swing era. By this point, swing wasn't just popular, it was the sound of American life. National radio networks like CBS and NBC broadcast big band performances into homes across the country. Swing music also began to chip away at racial barriers, though slowly. Benny Goodman was one of the first major white band leaders to integrate his ensembles, hiring pianist Teddy Wilson, vibraphonist Lionel Hampton, and briefly, vocalist Billie Holiday. And in 1938, Billie Holiday became the first black singer to tour full-time with a white big band, Artie Shaw's orchestra. This spirit of integration wasn't just happening on stage. It showed up on the dance floor, too. The Savoy Ballroom in Harlem became a cultural hub of the swing era, known not only for its legendary music battles, but for welcoming an integrated crowd at a time when most venues were still segregated. During World War II, swing became part of the American soundtrack. It played at USO shows, was broadcast to troops overseas, and blasted from radios back home. For soldiers and civilians alike, it provided a sense of comfort and emotional grounding in a time of global uncertainty. But after the war, America's tastes slowly began to change. As baby boomers turned to rhythm and blues and rock and roll, swing music became their parents' dinner party soundtrack, instead of the sound of their own wild nights out. It's funny to think this music we now associate with laid-back elegance was once the pop phenomenon of its day, like Beatlemania, Bieber Fever, or Brat Summer. For America's so-called greatest generation, swing was the cultural center of everyday life.
Hi, I'm Sebastian Rios.
Abdias Armenteros.
TJ Reddick.
And we are New Jazz Underground.
If you've been a longtime watcher of Trackstar, you probably remember Abdias. We were standing outside of Jazz at Lincoln Center. He had a saxophone on his back. He's part of this group. This is from a performance we recorded in our studio a few weeks back. What's the most important instrument in jazz?
Between drums and piano. No, drums and bass, actually, yeah. Because bass is the foundation. This is it right here. I can just float on top and do whatever I want. I'm chilling.
Expand on that a little bit more.
They're the foundation. They provide rhythm and harmonic foundation. He's playing the roots of he's mostly playing the roots of every chord. And while, playing constant time. And so is TJ. But TJ's also interacting with me. Maybe on a rhythmic level. Sebastian could be interacting with me too on a harmonic. Maybe I do something else, like I play a different chord quality or something. It catches, it's kind of on him to like catch it and make it pretty, instead of it being like a mistake.
Can you pass him the mic, TJ?
Oh yeah, sure.
What do you agree?
Yeah, going off of that, I kind of have a relation to maybe food in a certain instance. So he might be like the dish at its basis. So you got your meat, you got your rice, potatoes, whatever it be. So and then how I look at it is I provide the rhythm, and I equate that to like seasoning. So you have like salt, pepper, garlic, or whatever kind of onion powder you might want to do with that. So if you could like play just the beginning of a soundtrack. So that's just the foundation,
For the next two songs, we're still in the swing era, but jazz soloing is starting to evolve into something a little bit more complex. You want to start?
Sure.
Nice.
Nice.
I love this. It's a standard tenor saxophone repertoire right here. This is a must know. Whoa-ba-dee-da, whoa-dee-dee-dee. You gotta learn it. Whoa-ba-da-ba-da. Coleman Hawkins can be considered the best tenor saxophone player ever because he does not repeat himself. And that is, I feel like, the height of what improvisation is, where you can spew out language and vocabulary and everything and not repeat yourself, and you're playing for an extended amount of time without repeating yourself. That's just what improvisation is, I think, for me. So Coleman Hawkins, the father of the tenor saxophone. Whoa. This is one of the hippest arrangements. Like, yeah, Mary Lou Williams playing Stardust, like that clarinet melody is great. And then, if you paid a little more. This guy, Don Bias on tenor. Another king of the tenor saxophone, just coming out of Coleman Hawkins, who preceded him. Yep. We consider Coleman Hawkins like the father of the tenor saxophone, and then from there, he's like the tree, and then all the root of the tree, and then all the branches that stem from it. Don Bias is definitely one of them, and kind of is in this context playing in Mary Lou's band, who Mary Lou was a very influential figure in the jazz idiom. She had a lot of knowledge harmonically, and is often credited for teaching a lot of the icons that we, Thelonious Monk and a lot of the people who came about in the bebop era. They were at her house hanging, like learning from her, because she was like the hip cat of the time. Like they wanted to learn from her.
We're going to keep moving forward with our timeline and our playlist with the legendary Christian McBride. All right, before we start the music, just introduce yourself.
My name is Christian McBride, and I mostly play the bass.
You play, what bass do you typically mostly play? Or is it a range?
The upright bass.
Upright bass, but you also play electric bass
Yes, I
too
do.
sometimes. So
Yep.
what's the difference between those two? From someone who
About
really,
three-
I don't know anything about
About
music.
3 feet.
One's easier to carry around.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the upright bass is that's Mother Earth.
Yeah.
You know, and the electric bass is her restless child.
What did you start with?
The electric bass.
Yeah.
My dad plays bass as well as my great uncle. So I started playing the electric bass when I was 9, and then I started playing upright bass when I was 11.
Why did you make the transition?
Well, when I was in middle school, I had to play in the school orchestra, and you can't play electric bass in the school orchestra. So my first choice was actually the trombone because I wanted to be like Fred Wesley because I was already a big James Brown fan.
Yeah.
And when it became obvious quickly that I had no talent for playing the trombone, the brass instructor said, well, I understand you play the electric bass. I said, yes. He said, well, why don't you play the upright bass? And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. He was like, yeah, give me the trombone. Don't do that. Best decision anyone's ever made for me. His name is Kevin Rogers. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. People say I should buy him a car.
Yeah. I probably should.
Right.
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about the foundations of jazz music. Like,
Yes.
what's the foundational instrument? I'm not going to say what they said, but you tell me what you think it is.
Well, I think the foundational instrument for all cultures, for most cultures, is the drum. The bass and the drums should actually be one instrument. That's how I think about it. The bass and the drums define any particular sort of so-called genre.
Yeah.
It's what the bass and the drums are doing. It's not funk unless the bass and the drums are playing funk. It's not swinging unless the bass and the drums are swinging. So I would say the drum. Am I right?
He said the bass, but you said the bass and the drums, and they are interconnected.
I think it's one and the same.
Yeah.
Again, I
rhythm.
use a parental parallel. It's the mom and the dad.
Here you go.
Oh, here we
play
go.
some jazz.
Oh, boy.
And you could tell me this is tricky because a lot of different songs are played by a lot of different people. So you have to almost listen out for like a signature that these folks have. For song number 5 on the playlist, we're going to move into the bebop era. We'll define exactly what bebop is later on in this episode. This particular recording is from 1953.
Bird.
Yeah.
You know, Charlie Parker is the person that made me fall in love with jazz. Like, seriously, it was a done deal once I heard an album called Jazz at Massey Hall, which was Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, Charles Mingus, and Max Roach. And the joy that they played with on that record. And I think certain people are such innovators. They're such stars. And I don't mean star in the celebrity sense. I mean like an actual sort of natural phenomenon. They come to planet Earth, change the way things are done, and they go. You know, Charlie Parker did that. You know, you listen to any alto saxophonist before him, and you listen to every alto saxophonist after him. Actually, most jazz musicians, period. Like, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie literally created a whole new language.
So what do you hear when you hear Charlie Parker? What is it? Is there a signature? Is there, like, you identify it right away? You can probably identify the tone of how he plays.
Right.
What are you hearing?
Well, again, you know, it's kind of like, you know, Charlie Parker sort of helped to write the New Testament, you know. I think Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington helped to create the Old Testament, and Bird and Dizzy came along in the 40s and took all of that prior language and sped it up, put it on such a high intellectual level, every musician had to take notice, you know. And the thing is, whether you liked it or not, because, you know, Louis Armstrong made it clear that he wasn't a huge fan of bebop, but he knew how great Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were. So when I hear Bird, I hear the new language. I mean, you know, I don't know how new you would call it now, because I mean that's from, you know, Charlie Parker came on the scene in the 40s.
Yeah.
But still, some, you know, 80 years later, people are still playing that.
Yeah. Yeah, when you think about jazz music, when I think about jazz music, say I think about maybe a quartet or a quintet. But before those guys, it would have been these
Right.
big bands on stage.
Right. Well, World War II really did, it kind of helped to kill the big band era.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why Charlie Parker was so important. The whole idea of a compact band. Nobody can afford to travel with a big band anymore. Well, let's get these small groups together, and they pioneered that as well.
We just heard Christian McBride say that Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker literally created a new language with bebop. So let's go back to the studio for a short essay on what bebop is and its role not only in jazz history, but in American culture. Imagine it's 1945. You've just come home from the war, still carrying the weight of Europe or the Pacific, and someone says there's a club downtown you have to check out. You step inside expecting the familiar swing of a big band. Instead, you hear something sharper, faster, stranger. Dizzy Gillespie's trumpet is darting around the melody like a hummingbird. Charlie Parker is breaking rules you didn't know existed. Jazz has changed completely, almost overnight. That shock was real. For most listeners, bebop seemed to appear out of nowhere. But the seeds were planted years earlier in cramped after-hours clubs like Minton's Playhouse and Monroe's Uptown House. Musicians like Mary Lou Williams, Thelonious Monk, Kenny Clark, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie were reshaping the music. They sped up tempos, reharmonized chord progressions, and pushed improvisation into new territory. Bebop took shape in those sessions, honed night after night, jam after jam. So why did it feel so sudden? One reason was the American Federation of Musicians recording ban of 1942 to 1944. The strike halted recordings at the major labels, creating space for independent labels that would later release bebop records after the war. It also weakened the union-backed big bands that had dominated swing, clearing the way for smaller combos. When the ban lifted and those new labels started putting out music from the Harlem jam session scene, it sounded like a revolution in a flash. At the same time, the world around jazz was shifting. World War II economics killed the big band era. Gas and rubber rationing made touring expensive. Many leaders couldn't afford to travel with a 15-piece ensemble, and a lot of ballrooms closed or cut costs. Small combos were cheaper to book and easier to transport, and the new music fit this stripped-down format. There was a cultural shift, too. Black soldiers fought overseas under the Double V banner, victory abroad and at home, and returned unwilling to accept the old racial order. Jazz reflected that new confidence. Musicians were less interested in smiling through a floor show and more determined to be treated as serious artists. Critics and audiences were deeply divided. Some heard chaos, others heard the future. In reality, bebop wasn't designed as protest music, but it became a declaration of artistic independence. It demanded that listeners meet the musicians on their terms. And because of the recording gap, this leap forward sounded like a different language. The soundtrack of post-war America had gone from swing to something completely new. Before we move on to the next song, a quick message from our sponsor, Rivian. As you guys know from previous episodes, I love my Rivian. Today, I want to talk about a unique feature of this car that a lot of other cars don't have, the Rivian app. It's the best way to track the amount of charge you have on the car. If you want to plan a trip from home before you actually go on your drive, you can do that. It'll tell you exactly where to go. If you need to charge along the way, Rivian is automatically going to set up charging stations. You can control the temperature from your cabin remotely. So if it's the summer and it's blazing hot and you want to cool your car down before you jump in, you can do that. The connection between the app and the car is seamless. When I walk up to the vehicle, it automatically senses that I'm there and unlocks the door for me. I hop right in. The seat adjusts to my perfect position. I'm telling you, Rivian is the greatest car in the world. If you don't believe me, go demo drive one today. I guarantee you're going to love it. All right, back to the show. We're 5 songs into the playlist, and this is where things really start to get tough because in the 50s and 60s, jazz music starts to splinter into lots of different subgenres. There's cool jazz, hard bop, third stream, modal jazz, free jazz, avant-garde, bossa nova, Latin jazz, jazz fusion, and of course, many, many more. For the next 2 songs on this playlist, I tried to pick 2 songs that captured 2 very different directions that jazz was heading. One much more rooted in a blues tradition, and the other more experimental. It's a classic.
Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers with his all Philadelphia band. Lee Morgan, Benny Golson, Jimmy Merritt, and Bobby Timmons, the composer. Man, Art Blakey, probably one of the greatest, most important mentors, talent nurturers in the history of jazz. To study Art Blakey's bands from the mid-50s to his death, you pretty much cover most major band leaders in jazz, you know, from Lee Morgan to Freddie Hubbard to Wayne Shorter to Curtis Fuller to Cedar Walton to Woody Shaw to, you know, all the way down to Wynton and Terrence Blanchard, Branford Marsalis, Donald Harrison, kind of crazy, you know. But that record right there, for lack of a better term, I don't think they were using this word in 1958, but that was a big crossover smash. You know, like that was a hit. That was a jukebox hit.
Yeah.
You know, like all the R&B people know that song, the blues people know that song. I recorded that song multiple times with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of them aren't jazz people. You know, I recorded that song once with Regina Bell, and I recorded that with Jose James on my upcoming big band recording. So, like, that's a favorite among anybody who likes some groove. So,
serious standard.
Hail to the one and only Art Blakey.
For the next song on the playlist, let's head back to New Jazz Underground and a song from 1957.
Yeah, Thelonious Monk and
He's in the essential 10
of jazz pianists.
of just jazz artists, jazz figures.
You know, if you want to come through a certain history, you would for sure have to have him to understand more about just jazz, for sure.
Monk is one of the all-time icons of jazz. Basically, before he was 30 years old, he didn't get a record deal at all. And it was called the Years. And nobody would hire Monk. You know, these greats like Charlie Parker, they were getting all this accolades at the time. And they were all playing his music. But they thought he played so strange that they couldn't play with him, right? And so he didn't really get his due until later on. Yeah. But his sound was consistent. The genius thing about Thelonious is that he was so... You could never mistake his playing for another pianist. Yeah. You can never listen to him and go, oh, who is this? It was so undeniable. And he has such an approach that's his rhythm and harmony and just his sound is so unique to him, you know? And that's what really jazz is about. It's like he's coming out of stride piano. In New York City, he used to get up with people like Fats Waller, or James P. Johnson, who are these excellent, you know, stride pianists, where basically you play the bass line in your left hand, you're like, dun, 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 and then you play the melody and all the accoutrement on your right hand. Yeah. But, you know, he would learn from them and he would play with them, and they would go, now do your own thing, man. And he would start playing his Monk stuff, and they go, that's what we like about you, man. You're yourself.
It was viewed, it might have been viewed to the public as strange, but it's like, it was virtuosic in his own right, you know, because only he was doing that. Yeah. And, you know, dealing with, I guess in a more technical sense, like he was dealing with certain dissonances that at first to the listener, you're kind of like, oh, that's peculiar, you know? But the more you study music and the more you get into it, you're like, oh no, but that's, like that he did that on purpose. Not like he's messing up. Like that was a purposeful thing he did. He's dealing with this dissonance and through, you know, whatever harmonic thing you might get yourself into, you realize that that's actually like a valid option in like
right.
in choice of notes that he's
You guys ever mess around on the piano?
Yes, you kind of have to.
You all do.
Yeah.
If you want
Yes.
to compose, get better at this music, I feel like that's a rite of passage, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I compose a lot on the piano, but the piano is like you could play everything on the piano.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's all the keys. You have everything in front of you, and you can like view everything from 1,000 feet. Whereas like when I'm playing my instrument, you can only play one note a lot of the time, and it has a certain role. But that you can get into the bass, the rhythm, the melody, and have like a full scope of what's going on.
We've been talking a little bit in this episode about the social role of jazz, exactly when you should be listening to it. And Jon Batiste has some very appropriate instructions for when you should listen to Monk.
Monk records go crazy. If you're trying to have a real moment of culture in your courtship, put on some Monk, put on some Duke. I'm just telling you, trust me.
It's for the kids.
Around midnight, yeah.
For song number 7 on the playlist, we're headed in an entirely new direction with jazz fusion. This track is from 1970.
Miles, Bitches Brew. That's Pharaoh's dance.
Yeah, now we're getting later.
Yeah.
So what happens with Miles
Man,
as he moves through the years?
when Miles started making these recordings, he was very much paying close attention to what was going on in the contemporary world. I think Miles saw the writing on the wall. He said, listen, people aren't really doing that kind of straight ahead Art Blakey hard silver sound anymore. There's a whole new thing going on right now. And I always question people that say like, Miles was trying to, he was consciously trying to be more commercial. There's nothing commercial about Bitches Brew. That record is beautifully weird. It's strange. I don't think people who like Simon and Garfunkel are listening to Bitches Brew going, yeah.
Yeah. If anything, it feels like it would have been more commercial for him to do
Right.
a cool
Exactly.
jazz kind of
Exactly. That's
bebop
right.
thing.
And so I like the fact that, the word behind Miles Davis is mysterious. Everything about Miles, they call him the Prince of Darkness. It's like he didn't talk much. And then when he did, he had that raspy, otherworldly voice. You know what I mean? So there's so much mystery in Miles's, his whole aura, But Bitches Brew to me is kind of like the peak of that mystery. Like, what are they doing? It's like, is it trying to be jazz? Is it trying to be rock? Is it trying to be R&B? If it was, I think it failed. It wonderfully failed to hit any three of those.
Yeah.
It's its own sound. And, talking to, Chick Corea about it, talking to most of those cats about those sessions, they're like, we actually didn't know what was going on. Like they brought in, Joe Zawinul brought in a chart with like 8 bars on it. Like, okay, here's the song. And everybody's kind of looking around like, all right, roll the tape, see what happens. Then Benny Maupin with that bass clarinet just kind of bubbling underneath to make it even more spooky. It's a brilliant album. But I will say, a lot of people were experimenting with electric instruments long before Miles was.
Yeah.
I also believe Miles gets a lot of credit for things that had already been going on. Joe Zawinul was using the Fender Rhodes in Cannonball Adderley's band at least a couple of years before Miles was. People like Jeremy Steig and Jean-Luc Ponty, who had a young George Duke playing with him. A lot of cats were toying, Gary Burton and his bands, they were toying with the electric stuff before Miles got to it. But Miles, when he did it, it was kind of like all of the younger cats went, now it's cool. We got the green light from Miles.
I feel like the biggest thing about Miles is his longevity, right? He existed or was alive to hear the music pre-bebop, to bebop, and after. He was in the era of cool jazz, and then, kind of formed what was his voice, and then started implementing also his ideas on, band leading and putting music together, putting a set together, how, and then just experimenting with different ways in which he believed the music should go. He's definitely he's definitely up there.
Icon of style.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm a fan of Miles Davis's experimentation and exploration, but not everybody was. Perhaps most notably, Wynton Marsalis. So we're going to go to the studio for a short essay on a rivalry between two jazz greats. One of the most legendary feuds in jazz history, and one that helps us understand the philosophical split in jazz after the 1960s, is that between Miles Davis and Wynton Marsalis. In the late 60s and early 70s, Miles began to embrace America's new popular music, rock, and mix it with jazz. With albums like In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew, he popularized fusion on a scale no one else had. While this turn was embraced by many, others saw it as a form of selling out, even as disrespectful to the jazz tradition. Perhaps the most notable of these detractors was Wynton Marsalis. The son of pianist Ellis Marsalis, Wynton was born in New Orleans in 1961. By his teenage years, he was already a hot, up-and-coming trumpet player. In 1980, he moved to New York to attend Juilliard, and that same year, Columbia Records signed him, making him Miles Davis's label mate. Like Davis, who had left Juilliard in the 1940s to play with Charlie Parker, Wynton left in 1981 to join Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Playing with Blakey, he developed a reputation as the next great trumpeter in jazz. He also toured with Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams, three alumni of Miles's legendary 1960s second quintet, casting him directly in Davis's shadow. By 1982, he released a self-titled debut album with his own quintet to wide acclaim, positioning him as a band leader, not just as a sideman. Wynton's career took off fast. In 1983, he became the first ever artist to win Grammy Awards in both jazz and classical in the same year, repeating that feat again in 1984. While promoting his work, Marsalis positioned himself as the torchbearer of jazz tradition. Influential writers like Stanley Crouch and Albert Murray championed him as the embodiment of serious Black American art, and major outlets profiled him as a cultural spokesperson. In a 1982 Downbeat article, Wynton explicitly rejected jazz fusion, calling out Davis. They call Miles' stuff jazz. That stuff is not jazz, man. Just because someone played jazz at one time, that doesn't mean they're still playing it. With bold declarations like this one, Marsalis quickly became the central figure of a neo-traditionalist movement, a revivalist emphasis on acoustic jazz. Davis shot back, sneering at Marsalis' classical work, saying, "They got Wynton playing some old, dead European music." And before long, the simmering feud spilled over from interviews onto the stage. It all came to a head in 1986 at the inaugural Vancouver Jazz Festival. During Davis's set, Marsalis walked on stage and asked to play. Davis later claimed he told him, "Get the fuck off my stage," while Marsalis and bandmate Wallace Roney recalled a curt, "No." Marsalis played anyway, seen by some as grandstanding, though others framed it as part of the jazz tradition of sitting in. For the festival organizers, this was a dream outcome for year one, giving them publicity and credibility. Considering how well Davis's music has stood the test of time, it might be easy to dismiss Marsalis as out of touch and resistant to innovation. Miles constantly pulled jazz into the sound of the times. In the 1940s and 50s, he moved from cool jazz's classical textures to hard bop's blues and gospel roots to the modal openness of Kind of Blue. In the late 60s and 70s, he fused jazz with soul, funk, and rock. And by the 80s, he was recasting contemporary pop songs as standards. But each turn unsettled purists and kept jazz alive in dialogue with popular music. Regarding his electric turn, Davis recalled in his autobiography that he was listening closely to artists like Jimi Hendrix, James Brown, and Sly Stone, saying he wanted to bring that electric, funk-driven rhythm into his own band to connect with younger audiences. While many critics were sour on fusion, the kids loved it, and label executives loved it. Released in 1970, Bitches Brew became Davis's first gold record, selling over 500,000 copies in the U.S. by 1976. It topped the jazz charts, marking Davis's biggest commercial breakthrough up to that point. It also hit number 35 on the Billboard 200, a remarkable crossover feat for an experimental jazz album. Columbia and other labels soon encouraged more musicians to explore this sound. On the eve of the Vancouver showdown, Davis had just released You're Under Arrest, an album that featured covers of Michael Jackson's Human Nature and Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, both of which became staples of his late 80s live sets. While Miles' justification of these songs as new standards may have legitimacy, it is hard to believe commercial considerations weren't part of the equation at all. Surely, this is how Wynton felt. He didn't criticize fusion and pop-adjacent jazz because he didn't understand the sound. He was just trying to protect the music he loved from over-commodification. Ironically, Wynton Marsalis' strict focus on pure acoustic jazz helped keep the music visible in the 80s and beyond. While his records never sold like Davis's, his profile, media presence, and eventual leadership at Jazz at Lincoln Center gave jazz an institutional foothold and kept it part of the cultural conversation. And today, he's not just guarding tradition, but actively engaging the next generation, playing with and teaching younger musicians like Abdias, ensuring people keep debating what jazz is and what it can be. One of the things that I take from that story about Wynton and Miles is that in a lot of ways, they're both right. Wynton is right for trying to root jazz in tradition, and Miles is right for trying to push it as far as possible. That's kind of what makes jazz special. It can be both of those things at the same time. And if it wasn't for their intense rivalry, I don't know if the genre would have been pushed forward in the way that it was. For song number 9, why don't we actually listen to a little bit of Wynton Marsalis on this track? He's a sideman for a very famous member of Miles Davis's second famous quintet. This song is from 1982.
Uh-oh. Oh, that's Wynton with Herbie, Ron, and Tony, right? Yeah. That's from that album called band. Quartet.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved this record when I was in high school.
Yeah.
It was sort of like the coming of age of Wynton Marsalis. Herbie, of course, had done some amazing work with the VSOP Quintet with Freddie Hubbard, Wayne Shorter, himself, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. And then he heard Wynton Marsalis and decided to bring him on the road. And, you know, Wynton was already carving a name out for himself playing with Art Blakey.
Yeah.
But when he got with Herbie and Ron and Tony, his stock just flew out of the roof.
This is a really interesting phenomenon in jazz music where musicians sort of play with each other and change bands, and there's lots of different variations. You don't have, like, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones never changed, you know what I mean, like swapped.
I would have loved to see what would have happened had they done that.
Why does that happen so much in jazz in particular?
I think it actually happens in other genres. I think a lot of country musicians probably share musicians. A lot of R&B musicians share musicians. But jazz is such a musical community. Oh, also a lot of bluegrass musicians do that as well. So yeah, I just think it's a community. It's a community of idea sharing, you know, and we all learn from each other. I mean, I think about how, like, you take the Miles Davis quintet of the 60s with Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Tony Williams. You take John Coltrane's quartet with McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, and Elvin Jones. There's plenty of stories like, hey, Elvin can't make the gig tonight. Hey, Tony, can you sit in? You know what I mean? So, like, that's just not really a big deal for jazz musicians. I mean, I wonder what Charlie Watts would have sounded like subbing for Ringo in the Beatles. It probably would have been just fine, you know.
But it would have sounded.
It would have sounded
a little different,
and that's fine.
And that's cool.
That's the great part about jazz. You know, the goal is to learn as much as you can from a musical standpoint, so the art that you create can be the best it can possibly be, as opposed to like, you know, this is my band and this is the brand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The brand is how great the music is, no matter who's playing it.
The brand is how great the music is, no matter who's playing it. I think what Christian McBride is getting at here is no matter who the lead artist, the band leader is playing with, their signature is going to come through. Herbie is one of those artists where the brand is strong, no matter who is playing on it. To explain this better than I ever could, let's go to another very famous pianist, Jon Batiste.
When you play the piano, what's deep about it is such an incredible thing to manifest the sound out of an instrument. It's an inanimate object. It's like a table or a chair. It's just something, it's wood and hammers and metal.
Yeah.
So many people have played the piano and everybody has their own sound. Monk has created a sound through the piano that is so recognizable. He says something that I always quote, the genius is the one that's most like themselves. There's something in his sound that
You could just hear it.
speaks to who he is, and the essence of how he was able to get it to come out of the piano is such a mystery. Same with Herbie Hancock. Herbie Hancock is one of the greatest musicians to ever live, and one of the marks of a great musician is when you can hear within a few notes the essence of who they are. Just comes right out. It's not about how fast you can play. It's not about how much you know. You don't have to know a whole lot to be able to get your essence to come through an instrument. It's good to know a lot, but you can have something that's within you, like that thing that we're talking about with Louis Armstrong when he born. I'm sure the first time he picked up the trumpet, it was just something innate within him that he honed over years and years, but it was just something that comes through with all of the greats. It's just a thing.
It's true in all types of music, but it feels like in particular, it's a hallmark of jazz.
Well,
of jazz players, is finding a signature.
Well, in jazz, we play instruments.
Yeah.
And we're into instrumental expression at its highest, most nuanced, most depthful level.
Yeah.
So when you talk about instrumental expression, there's so much that goes into it. And there's so much that's happening in real time. You're co-creating with people on the fly. It's like we're having this conversation. I imagine you add 6 other people and y'all all speaking from the language of your instrument and the language of the music that you share as a whole. And you could not even speak the same language verbally.
For the final song on our playlist, we're moving all the way forward to 2015 and an artist who's pretty well known in popular music for playing on Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album. I was curious what Christian McBride had to say about this artist.
This is Kamasi. I love this record, man. When it first came out, I sent Kamasi a text, and the record blew up.
Yeah.
This record did some wonderful things, and what I appreciated most about it is that it's an actual jazz record, meaning that it has swing rhythms in it. He reminded people that in order to be a cool jazz musician, doesn't mean you have to leave the swing rhythm behind.
So can you explain what that is? What a swing rhythm is?
Well, I'm paraphrasing Louis Armstrong, but when you hear that, that triplet feel, basically what lies under a swing feel is when you hear it's just another version of which is African. So when these different cultures kind of found their way onto Congo Square, and they started playing this music that kind of no one knew what it was, one of the things that came out of that eventually was, okay, well, we're not going to play let's just take the top part of that. It had the bass go boom, ba-doom, boom, 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 boom. So that, of course, developed over decades where you had Miles and Train and Cannonball and Hard Silver doing it in a more modern version in the 60s. And then once rock and roll got hot, that's like, like I was saying, like Miles and a lot of musicians at that time said, hey, let's get a little more contemporary. Let's kind of bring that sound into jazz. But then that sound kind of dominated jazz in the 70s, where everybody said, oh, let's swing is old. Let's make it more funk. Let's make it more rock. And there were a few people that stayed home. Art Blakey stayed home. McCoy Tyner stayed home. Eddie Palmieri, in many cases, stayed home. Like, he got funky, but that clave was still underneath, And then Wynton came along in the 80s, and him and Branford, Terrence Blanchard, kind of restored swinging acoustic jazz. And it's gone through all different kinds of phases in the 90s. The Tribe Called Quest, Black Sheep, they started sampling jazz into their music. And so when Kamasi came along, I know a lot of people know him from Kendrick, but Kamasi, I first met Kamasi when he was playing with Gerald Wilson. And so I knew his jazz pedigree. And so when that record came out and they swinging, I was just like, yes. So big props to my man, Kamasi Washington.
Where is jazz now? And where's it going?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question. I think one of the great things of living life is not knowing where it's going. You can always make plans, but you know what they say about the best laid plans. I think there are a lot of great musicians out there right now doing some great stuff. And it spans a lot of different, the range is broad. There's a lot of good acoustic swinging stuff out there. There's a lot of funky stuff out there. There's a lot of rocking stuff out there. But I think the current generation of young musicians are very well trained. And they're doing some really good stuff. I don't know if there's, right now, I don't know if there's a sort of a leading thing that would say this is jazz right now. It's a lot of different stuff.
And it can incorporate anything almost, right?
Yeah, yes, it can incorporate anything, but as long as there is some, like for me, the jazz clave is the triplet clave, the swing clave, the shuffle, the 12/8 groove. Now I'm getting into musician talk now. But, like I said, like in a lot of Latin music that you hear in New York, I don't care how much it expands, that pulse, that African pulse is going to be underneath. So in jazz, I got to have, there's got to be something underneath that lets you know, that points you to Congo Square. You know what I mean? And not Liverpool. Although I don't have a problem with Liverpool.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
I get that. We're gonna make a donation.
Oh, hey, wait a minute! Don't I get $5 per song?
You won a lot of money. You just dominated.
You do Cash App?
I'll cash.
I'm just messing with you.
I'll Cash App you.
Nah, don't worry.
Can we make
about
a donation to someone in your name?
Would it be weird to donate money to my own organization?
No.
Okay. This money is going to Jazz House Kids. Shout out to my wife, Melissa Walker.
And what's Jazz House Kids? What
Jazz
do you guys
House
do?
Kids is the most amazing organization in the country dedicated to teaching young musicians the democracy through the lens of jazz.
You obviously are a good person to teach because you know everything. Every song we played.
No.
Every song we played, you knew everything that was going on.
You have no idea how dry my mouth is right now. I can't wait for an afternoon martini. Take the edge off.
Thank you.
Man, what a pleasure.
That was awesome.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate you. You taught us so much.
Oh, man. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Whew.
So what's it like in 2025 being a jazz musician?
I mean, I feel like we're blessed and lucky to call this work. That you're doing something that you're so passionate about, and it's your job. Yeah, I feel like the only chore is getting to places.
Yeah.
The travel.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really what people are paying for. It's for us to travel to get to where, get to the venue.
Yeah.
Because once we're there and we set up and we play, it's like, I'm not working.
Yeah.
You know, I'm making music. Like
Yeah,
this is
with
what
my homies, with my friends. And it's so rewarding because a lot of the time, as a jazz musician, you work with other bands and you work in service of a leader.
Yeah.
But to have a collective with my friends, and for that to be our main thing and be able to go out on the road and share exactly what you want to play, is so meaningful, and it's such a blessing. And just to be able to represent the music nowadays, we're in such a time of like, you don't know which way is up a lot of the time. And so I feel like jazz is such a grounding way to get in touch with the actual parts of America to be proud about as an American, and there's just such a rich tradition, and to just take part of it and be a part of it. Like before talking about, how Ron Carter's on that record, be able to study with somebody like that, him being able to play with somebody like Wynton and just take part in this whole insane continuum. That's what we do it for.
It's American at its core.
Right. Yep. 100%.
Like, it's one of those few art forms that we really can lay
Yeah.
claim on.
Yes.
that we can claim.
One more thing before we go. Where do we end?
Well, I would just like to say this has been a great experience to share this time with you on the planet Earth as we orbit the sun, and we take our time in life and we move through it. And there's so many things that we could have done, and I'm glad that we did this.
What you said before about all the young guys out there, that's a good theme for this playlist too.
Okay.
Take these songs, download this playlist and just play it for somebody and listen to it and study from it. And also listen to this guy's new record.
What he said. Look at that track star. We still in race, man.
As we wrap up this episode and I reflect not only on these conversations, but any conversations we've had doing Trackstar about jazz music with musicians or just fans of the genre, one word comes to mind: passion. Jazz musicians and fans are incredibly passionate about jazz music, and that comes through when they're talking about it. It comes through when they're playing it. It comes through when you hear it on the records or at a live performance. There's so much passion in jazz music. The other thing that comes to mind for me is how intertwined jazz history is with American history and the history of recorded music in this country. Some of the very earliest songs ever put on wax were jazz songs. So, a quick note on how we make this show. We had long-form conversations with all the different guests here, and obviously only chose a few songs from each guest. We're going to include all the songs from this episode in a playlist that I'm going to share below, but I'm also going to include all the other songs I played for our guests in that same playlist. So you can listen to a little jazz music yourself if you feel inspired after listening to or watching this show. That's it for this week's episode. Come check back next Wednesday. We'll be here again with another very exciting new episode of the Trackstar podcast for you. As always, if you want to support the show, publicopinion.nyc. You can buy a Trackstar hat or a sweatshirt, or maybe by the time this show is actually aired, we're going to have new stuff on there for you to buy. That's all I got to say about that. Roll the credits. Until next time, peace. Trackstar is a presentation of Public Opinion created by me, Jack Coyne, Kieran Coyne, and Henry Cornaros. Written and produced by Noah John. Edited and produced by Haley Sobel. Theme and original composition by Kieran Coyne. Mixing by Christian Stropko. Our agent is Joanna Orland at UTA. Thanks for listening. See you next Wednesday.